Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. It's very nice to see you, but we have quite a lot to get through today. We have quite a lot of fruity things going on. We have to look very closely at the newly published accounts of Archewell, which emerged today and seem to signify quite a drop in funding and a rise in expenses. Very interesting. We're also going to be looking at Princess Michael's blackamoor brooch and various other claims that Mr. Scobie made in that so-called book. And I will also throw in some royal refreshment during proceedings as well to lighten the mood. But we've got a busy show. Let's start with something rather edifying and life-enhancing, and that will be the Christmas cards that emerged this week from the Prince and Princess of Wales and their Majesties. And as you can see, their Majesty's card was shot in the throne room on Coronation Day or thereabouts by Hugo Bernand, wishing you a very happy Christmas and New Year. And the sentiments in the late Queen's Christmas cards, Lilibet and Philip, or Lil and Phil as I like to call them, my dears, they used to sign off with best wishes for Christmas and the New Year. And I find it interesting because I prefer Merry Christmas. To me, you don't have a happy Christmas, you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. But admittedly, that might be rather bourgeois of me, my dear, so it could be a social faux pas, but I like a Merry Christmas, because when else does anybody wish you merry tidings? Do you understand? But there we are, an official portrait. And then the Wales family portrait received applause from all over, taken by Josh Shinner. I thought it was very pleasant. It's very nice. Many people love it. I do not. It doesn't appeal to my personal taste, but that's my personal taste, so don't get your knickers in a twist. I know that everybody else seems to like it. I don't like the studio backdrop. I don't care for the plimsolled feet with bits of studio backdrop material and fabric scrunched up all around them. I think it looks cheap, and possibly I was spoilt by previous Christmas cards from the Prince and Princess of Wales because they've been done so well. And also Catherine's own photography is exemplary. And I like the candid moments that are often captured in that way. But you know, this is a different style. I love Christmas cards to be about nature. And there's so much wonderful nature and scenery in all the royal residences and palaces that to me it almost feels sinful to waste showcasing them within the Christmas cards. But I think I overthink a little bit too much about it. But you know, I like that natural sort of affair. And Charlotte should be queen. I'm going to say it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I wish that girl was going to be queen, our little Anne. But I'm quite sure that she will make for sterling sibling support in a way that her uncle has never quite captured. And I'm thankful that at least we can say we're still referring to Christmas and not broadening the church to happy holidays for all and sundry. Still Christmas. A montage has been unveiled of the Princess of Wales visiting a baby bank. She spent an afternoon in Maidenhead in Windsor after a promise to return to that baby bank that she made in springtime. On this occasion, she brought the kiddies along, who just happened to be two princes and a princess. Charlotte was captured saying, "Ooh la la," which is a fruity saying that you'll often find me uttering as well, isn't it, my dears? Ooh la la. Another reason to love Princess Charlotte. She's full of sass, but they were there on serious business, and this food bank has been making up gift bags for children for 5 years and will be distributing thousands this Christmas, along with their usual parcels of clothes and goodies. Meanwhile, on the fuzzy end of the lollipop, from the shores of Montecito, competition emerges in the form of Archewell, who shared their Impact showreel, detailing in glorious regal technicolor Meghan's visit to Fisher House Foundation, calls to entrepreneurs, visits to New York mental health summits. They've been so busy doing their good deeds. A trip to the Marcy Lab School in Brooklyn and rebuilding a playground in Uvalde, Texas. Mary Poppins, eat your heart out. Somebody else is practically perfect in every way. Meghan Pop Out. The showreel was accompanied by an Impact report. It was a high-gloss affair full of word salad. They are committed to a simple but profound mission to show up and do good. Well, they're halfway there. The Foundation has provided 3,000 hours of trauma support and help for mental health in the wake of all the earthquakes earlier in the year. Very good. And apparently they sent tampons to 2,500 Nigerians. And so it is time to take a glance over the accounts of Archewell. Their 990 form has been released for the previous tax year, 2022. Very interesting tea, my dears. Come sip it with me. And do remember, I'm glancing at this as a layman. I have no expertise in this kind of thing, so use your own discretion. I'm going to round up numbers. I'm not going to be finicky about $187,000.20, this kind of thing. I'm going to round up here and there. Okay, so revenue incoming includes contributions and grants of $2 million. Before, just a year before, it was $13 million. So there has been a drop of 11 million. I should hide my glee a little better, shouldn't I? You know, if it was all going to wonderful causes and charity, then I would be a little less smug, but I can't help it, my dears. On the subject of expenses, grants that have been paid out to other organisations have gone from 3.1 million the previous year to 1.2 million. Salaries, in contrast, have gone from 163,000 to 640,000. Now, I do bear in mind there was only one member of staff before, the executive director, so obviously there's going to be a greater amount, but when you see their outgoings and the donations and support that Archewell are making to others, the comparison doesn't bode well. Revenue less expenses has gone from $9 million to minus $674,000. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, you couldn't make it up, could you? Total assets have dropped by over $500,000 from 9 million to 8.3 million. What are they paying all that staff, all the extra money for, and hiring new people? Because it seems the more that they hire and then the more they expend, the less they generate. Tut tut! Section 4 informs us that they are uplifting communities, building a better online world, restoring trust in information. Well, you could have fooled me, couldn't you? You could have fooled me. Here, Bunny, Bunny, see over there, that lilac tree. Go and fetch me an apple from it, would you, my dear? Go hop over to the lilac tree and find River a nice juicy apple, something fruity to crunch. I ask you, restoring trust and information, building a better online world. Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining, my dear. When the apple grows on the lilac tree. We turn to salaries, compensation of officers. I'm enjoying this. The Executive Director, James Holt, $227,000. Not bad salary, is it? And I'm quite sure he earns every single cent of it having to deal with those two. The Senior Strategic Advisor is on $140,000, and the Treasurer, another sort of co-director, on $92,000. They declared 40 hours of work per week. Meghan and Harry appear at 0 rate at 1 hour a week, and I know it's rather amusing to look at that as it is written literally, but if you are unacquainted with the way this works, then that is the standard amount that non-profits disclose for board participation, so that is totally regular. And I will interject at this point and mention that this is actually, disappointingly and quite sadly, quite a regular occurrence for many foundations of a similar ilk that read more or less the same. It makes for quite troubling reading, but I'm told that, for example, the Robert Kennedy Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, the Bill Gates Foundation, all these things are along the same lines, where you have a ratio of astronomical expenses that compares very unfavourably to any contributions or donations outgoing, often a ratio of over 90% on all these expenses, and then less than 10% on what they are actually emitting and giving. And it's discomforting. Don't you agree, my dears? It's discomforting when the ratio is so disproportionate. From what I could make out, they'd made no donations to causes that are particularly close to their heart, and I could be very wrong here, by the way. It could be a misreading, or they could be donating in other ways, but there was no mention of Invictus, Well Child, African Parks, Centre Barley, that kind of thing. But that could be included in another section or done in a different way. But on the subject of independent contractors that they pull in to help them, these three, first of all, who have Invisible Hand. Invisible Hand, strategic support, 180,000. Invisible Hand is Genevieve Roth, who is a self-declared racist, in fact. She is. She has told us before. You might have read an article about her in the past. Harry and Meghan's new strategist says all white people are rife with internalised racism. Speak for yourself, love. Speak for yourself. As a white woman of privilege, I have racist tendencies written in at a cellular level. Yes, you do, against white folk, so it seems. Isn't it interesting? Harry and Meghan are racist, in my personal opinion, and they surround themselves with self-declared racists. The previous year, Invisible Hand was compensated £215,000, so she's provided a little bit less strategic support this year. Number two, and I'm just going to guess at this pronunciation, don't come for me, Herlihy Loughran, could be Loughran or Loughran, 127,000. They are a PR firm, Beth Herlihy and Claire Loughran. And the third one, Georg Craig, at 120,000. This individual is described as an expert in digital policy, digital integrity, impact and online harm. Advises global leaders, is that what you call them? He advises global leaders on mitigating online harms, including work to advance tech policy reform and tech accountability at a global scale. Word salad, word salad. The horror continues. Total functional expenses, $2.6 million. $2.6 million. Now, it has dropped from last year, which was almost $4 million in expenses, but they managed to generate rather a lot more last year, didn't they? Because of donations they received. And these expenses include grants, which were down almost $2 million this year on last year. Last year, grants reached $2.9 million, this year, $1.1 million. Office expenses, last year, $4,000, this year, $57,000. That's an awful lot of pens. Well, to be fair on them, technical equipment for offices with, 4 or 5 new members of staff, okay, we'll give them that. We'll give you that, my dear, but go easy on the whiteout fluid. Travel has gone from 6,000 to 34,000, and then on the balance sheet we see that their total assets have gone from 9.1 million at the beginning of the year to 8.5 million at the end of the year. Bit of a loss there. And total liabilities at the beginning of the year were 132,000, and they've shot up to 218,000. Oh dear. This isn't making for the most encouraging reading, is it? Public support we now turn to, always an intriguing one. After the interjection of $10 million last year from one donor, widely rumoured to be one Oprah Winfrey, in return for their presence. For legal reasons, I must state that nobody knows if that was Oprah or not. But who was it? We'd love to know, wouldn't we? 10 million schmackers last year. Well, that bumped up last year's public support to $13 million. But without that 10 million injection, this year it's down to 2 million, from 13 to 2. And this time there were just 2 contributors I don't know if it was Oprah or Ellen, but it was $1 million per contributor. They haven't been identified, which is an awful shame. But my hunch is that it might have been the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, because no one else was paying into them. Who knows? It would be delicious to find out, wouldn't it? Could have been Catherine and William. But something tells me that won't be the way. Then we turn to activities outside the US. Grants throughout Europe, 119,000. Programme services, 136,000. And this was an implementation support for UK patronage programmes. So that's the section where I thought that perhaps some of Harry's home patronages or Invictus Centrale enterprises of that ilk, perhaps it comes under this £136,000 there, or the European grants. Possibly, I have no idea, but that's a thought. And grants were delivered to about, was it 16 or 17? About 17 organisations mentioned, $10,000 or over. The largest of them being 200,000 to Georgetown. Now, I believe it's something to do with Georgetown University, or part of that deals with gender, justice and opportunity. They explain it as adultification bias. Oh dear. I feel extremely ignorant, but I haven't come across this phrase before. It's another new one they're hurling at us, isn't it, my dear? Adultification bias. I'll have to Google that later and see if I've got it. Adultification bias and the inequities faced by black girls in the justice, education and medical systems. Fair enough. And then we have 165,000 to build a playground in Uvalde. This company, Kaboom, is the Karina Kaboom. What do you think? Actually, I'm wearing the colour of Karina Kaboom today, aren't I, my dears? Oh, the drama. Anyway, they had that playground built. And by the way, I'm not turning my nose up. I'm having a little poke at them, but I'm not turning my nose up if they are helping good and worthy causes. And some of these enterprises, I'm sure, are. Who would be so sour as to sneer at a playground built for children? But I am cynical and very disappointed in how much of the money coming in goes elsewhere. It seems rather self-defeating and quite a waste, even if it is a regular occurrence through similar kinds of entities. Hyas is another company. They received 50,000 for Ukraine, vital services to refugees and asylum seekers. Apparently this 50 grand is going to help increase resources for housing, food and transportation for the most vulnerable people, especially women and girls. How sexist. Because Ukrainian men aren't vulnerable at all, are they? They haven't been affected as bad as the women in the conflict, the international conflict, just because they're sent out to fight on their behalf. They're barely they don't need increased resources. Most of them have died, so they don't require resources anymore. But especially for women and girls. Well, in fairness, 75,000 appears later and it goes to Equimondo. In fairness, Equimondo supports boyhood. It's an initiative to foster healthy masculinity and gender equality. Ooh, Harry, you need to start rolling up for that, don't you, my dear? Rolling up and rolling in, because you're full of toxic femininity and you need to boost your healthy masculinity, my dear. And 44,000 went to an organisation called Purpose by Justin Bieber. Purpose, to explore, analyse and understand the interplay between news and social media in producing, amplifying and enabling hate speech. Well, you know who you want to talk to about that, don't you, darlings? Oprah Winfrey and yourselves. Because nobody has done more over the last few years to produce, amplify and enable hate speech. We saw you do it with your very own eyes, my dear. So you want to start with Harpo or whoever produced that mischief and finish with the stars of that production. The Duke and Duchess of Not Muchness, the Duke and Duchess of sucks eggs, the Duke and Duchess of succubuses. And it finishes off reiterating a section on other expenses, whatever other expenses entail. $534,000, program service expenses at $499,000, and management and general at $34,000. Well, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that affair, because their income certainly doesn't seem to even cover their expenses. And I'm not quite sure why they are holding that large fund of $8.3 million in reserve rather than issuing it out, but perhaps that is also the way. But you can educate me on that. I'm rather ignorant on these kind of affairs, that's why I hire an accountant. Well, we shall be waiting with bated breath to see what next year brings, won't we, my fruit crumbles? Let's have a little palate cleanser moment, shall we, my dear? A little royal refresher, because Maggie's censors were delighted to welcome their president, Queen Camilla, to their annual carol concert at St Paul's Cathedral. A magical evening with readings from Dame Joanna Lumley, Giles Brandreth and Charles Dance. Oh, Patsy, darling! Patsy, sweetie, 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 my dear Camilla, sweetie. Mwah, 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 mwah. Kissy, kissy. Oh, divine. La Croix, sweetie. La Croix. But the Queen prefers Van Cleef and Arpels. But deep in the legal chambers of London, Prince Harry was ordered to pay legal costs to the Mail on Sunday over £48,000 after failing to strike out part of his defence in his libel claim, in which he is suing Associated Newspapers Limited over an article, you might remember, concerning his legal battle with the Home Office over his security. Do you remember that article? It involved the accusation towards Harry that he was carrying out a masterclass in the act of spinning. Woohoo! He's been taking a lesson from wifey. Well, 48,000, that's only 10k more than the charter flight he took to Balmoral, isn't it, my dear? Small change to the Prince, small change to Prince Harry. Not bothered. But Associated Newspapers say they expressed an honest opinion and they didn't cause any serious harm. That's their defence. And Prince Harry wanted that line of defence thrown out of court, but he lost that bid last Friday and the objection he made was dismissed. Mr. Justice Nicklin ruled that the publisher had a real prospect of demonstrating that an honest person could have held the view that a statement released by Harry's representatives was indeed a masterclass in the act of spinning. Hear, hear, Justice Nicklin. But in a written order issued this week by Mr. Justice Nicklin, he said that a full libel trial would be scheduled for next year. Oh joy, oh joy. Get the popcorn ready and the Schnottentrana. In last week's ruling, Mr. Justice Nicklin also said that Associated Newspapers had a real prospect of demonstrating that a press statement and background briefing given to selected journalists on Harry's behalf were misleading. So stick that in your crack, or your pipe, or a combination of both, and smoke it, lover boy. In contrast, a character the polar opposite of Prince Harry, Prince Edward, patron of the Production Guild, visited the Wharf Studios to mark 10 years of filmmaking in Barking and Dagenham. This extraordinary success story has seen the area reinvigorated by studio and location filming, and Prince Edward looked gorgeous, didn't he, in his blue tie there. Lovely, getting on with his service, meeting with the people, never complaining and never explaining. Very royal. Unlike this mess from Mr. Scobie's book, which continues, and I will be continuing to review part of it. I still haven't finished it, but I am wading through it, but I will continue what I've already told you on my thoughts about it. But there has been a brouhaha of a kind in the press over the last few days regarding the late Queen's Equerry, who apparently was dispatched to help Meghan, one of many from the royal household that was dispatched to help Meghan. But she didn't approve, and she was offended, and she didn't like it, because she knows what's best, and she's an executive, and she can tell you what's key with one click of the fingers. We are told minimal thought went into race-related issues when it came to the Sussexes. This is the same institution that suggested that Lady Susan Hussey, yes, that Lady Susan Hussey, help biracial Meghan Markle acclimate to palace life and navigate the royal system. How dare you? How dare you besmirch Lady Susan in such a manner? Yes, that Lady Susan Hussey. What, the late Queen's bestie? One of her most trusted and closest confidants for many years, accompanying her all over the world. You speak of her as if she was some chambermaid. Not that there's anything wrong with chambermaids before you get your knickers in a twist. I've done similar jobs myself. Well, okay, French maid. I suppose you could say I was a French maid. It's a little bit closer to the truth, but I digress. He continues, the Duchess turned down the offer, probably having already sensed that it might not be the best idea. But that's just the thing, isn't it, Scobie-doo? It was the best thing. She was the late Queen's lady-in-waiting. She knew palace life intimately. When palace aides later told reporters, including myself, that they bent over backwards to make Meghan feel comfortable at Buckingham Palace, this included a follow-up suggestion that perhaps the Queen's Ghanaian-born household cavalry officer, Lieutenant Nana Kofi Tuamasi Ankara, should be the one to help Meghan. Seems like a perfectly good idea to me. Though a charming and intelligent man, how patronising, it stood out like a sore thumb to Meghan and her friends that, due to a lack of black or other non-white staff, let alone women, in relevant senior roles, the palace had to turn to someone who was the Queen's attendant. He was the Queen's Equerry, who does attend to the Queen, but has many duties. It is a highly esteemed, highly favoured position. To become an Equerry is a great and grand honour. And isn't it funny? If this is true, she was offered the help of an Equerry that happened to be a black male. Could you imagine the fuss and the stink he would be kicking up if it was a white male or a white female? Well, they already tried that with Susan Hussey, but that wasn't good enough for her. An old white woman wasn't good enough. Old white, posh white woman, and a young black man wasn't good enough for her. Do you see how nothing pleases these people or Meghan Markle, apparently? Who can they choose? Who would have done? Because Sophie was offered as well, wasn't she, from what we hear? But she didn't want Sophie's help. Thanks, but no thanks. I'll do things my way. I don't want to take up your time, and it would be wasting mine anyway. Thanks, but no. No, not you, Sophie, no. Who would she have accepted? Catherine? Did she want to shadow Catherine on work experience, work placement? I don't think so, because she wouldn't lend her a lip gloss. Who would have done? The Queen, I think, is the only one that she possibly would have accepted, although she would have thought that she was a bit too fuddy-duddy and fusty and old school. Let's do a work experience, Queen Lilibet, and I can show you how I run business and what it means to be truly enterprising and a businesswoman and also compassionate and a philanthropist. Oh, got so many tricks up that wizard's sleeve, that gal. Apparently a pal said to Meghan, I doubt Kate was offered an Equerry for guidance. Well, Kate's circumstances were different. Kate had been with William for many years, and she had had time to get acquainted with royal life. She had taken the time. She wasn't in a mad panic when it came around for date number 2, and you had to catch your flight home, but you really wanted the irresistible Harry, who you'd had such fireworks and chemistry with on date 1, that you really needed a bit of that todger so desperately, with all the men of the world falling at your feet. It was Harry's little pecker, Harry's frostbitten todger that you just couldn't resist and couldn't wait to jump upon. So you harnessed that date number 2, quick sharp, didn't you, my dear? Time was against you. Well, Catherine didn't have that. She had the university years, she had the waity-caty years, and didn't go leaping into everybody's arms trying to become chums and besties instantly. And that, I'm afraid, you see, my dear, is a case of the tortoise and the hare, and the advantage of being the tortoise instead of the hoppity-hop hare. No offence, Mr. Bunny. I think that's a bunny and not a hare. But Actually, I'm not quite sure. The people of Britain have got to stop apologising for their lives, for their history and their culture, regardless of who it offends. Our nation is disintegrating. What is a nation? A nation means shared values, a shared language, and shared national pride. Without those things, those ingredients, you just have a tangled heap of remorse and bitterness, and that is the direction we're going. Woo! We see evidence of it all over the Western world and the Anglosphere, Europe, UK, America, and beyond. All over the place we see it being eroded, and people really need to wake up and get a grip, because it is possibly too late already. And now we turn to the subject of Princess Michael of Kent, because Scobie broaches the issue, if you'll excuse the unintended pun there, he broaches the issue of Princess Michael and the Blackamoor brooch, which sounds like a murder mystery, doesn't it, my dears, or the next instalment of Harry Potter. Princess Michael of Kent and the Blackamoor brooch. And incidentally, that's one of the most common misspellings I see in my fruit basket in the comment section down there, my dear, when you very kindly compliment my brooches. It's often, in fact, maybe usually spelt the wrong way with an OA instead of a double O. Well, that's how we spell it here in the kingdom anyway. BROOCH for this kind of brooch. But we're broaching this scandal. And Mr. Scobie claims that he was gossiping with one of his contacts, a royal aide, who apparently knows Princess Michael and was chatting with her. And apparently Princess Michael said at some point, well, we could already guess what someone like her would be like. I saw it coming from miles away. My darling Marie-Christine, give her a gold star. Shut that door and give her a gold star. Oh, Marie-Christine, you were right. You were right, darling. So already she's one up. Scobie says Princess Michael has never been much of a fan of Harry's wife. Oh, Marie-Christine! Round of applause. We feel you, gal. We feel ya. We surely do. Princess Michael is not a big fan of anybody. Get some education. It takes a lot to impress our Princess Michael of Kent. Seriously. Kings and queens don't impress the gal. Prince and princesses don't impress the gal. And you think this Duchess of Not Muchness is going to rock up, this soap actress, and get her head spinning with the minds that she has been in the company of? It boggles the mind, truly. But after the Oprah interview, apparently Princess Michael told this aide that told Omid Scobie that she had said, Meghan's made it all about race, because that's all everyone does these days. A hat-trick, Princess Michael, 3 out of 3. You got it right 3 times in a row. Yes, that is all everyone harps on about these days. And it's sophistry, and it's mischief. And Marie-Christine ain't gonna fall for that kind of nonsense on stilts. As you'll recall, in 2017, Princess Michael attended the same event as Meghan Markle. And Mr. Scobie tells us that Princess Michael turned up to a Christmas lunch with biracial Meghan Markle wearing a Blackamoor brooch pinned to her coat lapel, blinded by unconscious bias or just callously indifferent. A highly exoticized bust of a man in servant regalia. Well, you're half correct, Mr. Scobie. Servant regalia. Servant regalia. Have you, my dear fruit, have you ever heard of a servant wearing regalia? Does it not occur to you, Mr. Scobie, and your mischief-maker chums out there, that the regalia is the regalia of a prince, and that is why this figure, this black figure, is shrouded in luxuries and jewels and gems and all kinds of gorgeousness? Servant regalia would be rags and a dustpan and brush. Regarding the whole furore, a senior royal source told Mr. Scobie, I don't think Princess Michael particularly cared. Good. Some in the family rushed to comfort Princess Michael afterward. They didn't feel the media onslaught was fair. It wasn't. Anyone with an eye can recognise the fact that the brooch Princess Michael was wearing was a creation of Joaillerie Nardi, who was a very highly esteemed Venetian jeweller. Of great note, his pieces are still very highly prized, and they don't go about being known as blackamoor brooches. They are Moretto pieces, Moretto jewels, if you will, and they were worn by everyone in society. Grace Kelly used to wear them, Elizabeth Taylor used to wear them, Ingrid Bergman, and these days the grandson of that original proprietor, Alberto Nardi, looks after things, and he was absolutely horrified by this entire scandal and this whole affair, and it brought a lot of nastiness to his doorstep and accusations, because, as he told interviewers at the time, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and the fact that Mr. Scobie just assumes that the depiction of a dark-skinned man in regalia is a servant is actually quite telling, isn't it? Because he's insinuating that it is a brooch of a slave, and he is insinuating that black people were only slaves. Even if they were dressed up to the hilt in princely regalia, they can only be regarded as a slave. So that's quite telling to me. The Moretto depicts an idealised Moor, not always of African descent, and certainly not of sub-Saharan descent. It pays homage to Venice's trading association with the Middle East. They were deeply intertwined as trading partners, and just as we might romanticise and exoticize and idealise Venice with all its smelly waterworks and sewers running around the place. No offence to any Venetians watching my day. It's a beautiful, magnificent city, but, you know, does have a reputation as having a bit of a pong from time to time and has a whiff, but I'm just using that to illustrate the point that we all, wherever we are in the world, we will exoticize and romanticize other parts of the world. But in the same way, Venice romanticized other far-flung corners of the world and of their business associates. The word blackamoor has its roots in the Latin word maurus, M-A-U-R-U-S, maurus, Moor, Moorish. It described the Berbers and people of Mauritania in what is now North Africa. And over time it came to mean, or came to refer to anybody Muslim, anybody with dark skin, and not even just those with dark skin. There were the blackamoors, and then occasionally they would refer to the white Moors, different kinds of Moor. But regardless, it was not much to do with Africa in the way that Mr. Scobie implies. And it was not much to do with servitude either, because these were princely figures that were depicted, and they resemble in many ways Balthazar, for example, who was one of the three kings of Orient, one of the three wise men, who was dark-skinned. Many of them resemble that figure and could have been based on him. And do remember that it was a Christmas lunch that Princess Michael was attending. How many Christmassy themed brooches is she going to have? One that resembles one of the three wise men might be apt. You know, that is a possibility. She wore it on occasions many times before, but it went, of course, without comment. And the current proprietor of Nardi, Alberto Nardi, says that not one person in the history of his store has ever entered the store and seen his pieces and complained. Not one person in history, according to him. And he says that Whoopi Goldberg is one of his customers, and she has been in the store and actually purchased a Moretti. She purchased it, and apparently she told him that it was a signifier of black pride. So I wonder what Mr. Scobie would make of that, because remember also that when you see the royal family orders with their portraits of previous kings, they wear those figurines the same in regalia on their breast. It's a way of exalting and celebrating and recognising beauty, showing it off to the world. Now, I can understand that there are various furnishings that you might call blackamoor, which present black people of the past in attitudes of servitude. I can understand why they might cause some discomfort, and I can understand how some of those pieces might not be appropriate or especially tasteful or considerate in a modern day setting. So I don't close my eyes to that, but I do think that we need to think and educate and listen before rashly dismissing someone and insisting that they get on board with our worldview and our philosophy and our ideology of 2023. Because I very much doubt, whatever you might think of Princess Michael's intentions, I very much doubt that she would ever intentionally embarrass the late Queen. And whenever there has been a slip-up, it has certainly not been to try and humiliate the Queen, to cause scandal and dramas in such an obvious way. And if anything, my guess would be that she selected it to signal a love of the world, to signal her open-mindedness. Some might call it clumsy. I'm not really a fan of lecturing people in what's clumsy. I think allow people to express themselves as they want to express themselves. Because Princess Michael, like all the other members of the royal family, have vast experience of the world and of all its peoples, much, much more than almost anybody else out there on earth. And that is not an exaggeration. You see how much they fit in, how many people they meet. Who else does that? They are more than familiar and more than educated on the fruits of empire and beyond. And I'm very familiar with you, my fruits, my fruit tarts and my fruit crumbles, so I am sure that I'll be receiving some fruity thoughts from you in the comment section below. I will see you next time, my dears. Have a nice evening, take care, and toodles!